In the last video, I took you behind the budget, the tax half you can see, the devaluation of the part you take home that you can't, and the negative gearing changes that the Prime Minister promised would never happen that did. And when the tax doesn't cover the bills, the government has three levers it can pull: cut spending, raise taxes, or print more money. They've stopped cutting, they're quietly raising taxes, and they're printing money behind the scenes. If you missed part one, watch that first. The link is in the description. In this video, I'm going to explain why they can't stop printing, why every leader who's tried to put the printer down has failed, and why COVID went further than it needed to. Hi, and welcome back to Capital Clarity with Christian. 15 years across NAB and Westpac as a banker, and now a full-time trader and financial fundamentals advocate, with my mission being to make money simple for you. Let me put you in the chair. You're the government. You're spending more than you earn. Way more. The bills keep coming. The tax revenue isn't enough and hasn't been for years. Now imagine your best mate runs a central bank. He has a money printer. Whenever you're short, your mate just fires it up and buys the bonds you've issued. Your debt gets funded, the lights stay on. Would you use it? Of course you would, and anyone would. It's the easiest decision in politics. You don't have to raise taxes. You don't have to cut spending. You don't have to tell voters you can't afford things that they're asking for, and for things that you promised you would provide them. The printer just solves the problem. But you already know what happens next. Supply of the dollar goes up, value of each dollar goes down, and the printer doesn't create wealth. It just quietly redistributes it, from anyone holding cash to whoever spends the new money first. Now, here's the obvious question. Surely they wouldn't keep doing it forever. Well, here's the problem. Governments work in 3-year cycles in Australia at the federal level. The person making the decision today knows they need to win the next election to keep their job. They're paid to keep the lights on until the next vote, not to think about what happens in 10, 20 years down the track. If you stop the printer, the economy slows down. Jobs are lost, pensioners get angry, you lose the next election. The government that gets voted in just turns the printer back on. They get the credit, you get the blame. So what do you do in that situation? You keep the printer running, of course, don't you? And you and your family don't get a 3-year cycle like the government. You're playing a 40-year endgame. You're trying to raise kids, build a career, own a home, and retire with dignity. You're playing chess, they're playing whack-a-mole. Japan, the warning we all ignored. We should have seen this coming. We did have a warning, a live one, for 25 years. In 2001, the Bank of Japan became the first major central bank in the modern era to push rates to zero and start printing money to buy their government bonds. They called it quantitative easing. That's where the phrase came from. Just temporary, they said, just to get their economy moving. Then they'll stop. But as we know, they never stopped. 25 years later, the Bank of Japan owns more than 46% of every Japanese government bond ever issued. Japan's debt to GDP is around 235%, the highest in the world. And the Japanese yen has lost roughly half of its value against the US dollar since 2011. Now, here's the question you should be asking. Japan printed money for 25 years. How come Japanese inflation didn't explode? The key thing to understand, Japan's printing was a government problem, not a people problem. The Japanese government was spending more than it collected in tax to stimulate the economy. The central bank printed to buy the government bonds. The bills got paid, but the Japanese households didn't get more money in their hands. They save. They've saved 15 to 25% of every paycheck for decades. Housing isn't a debt-fueled investment vehicle there. When the central bank prints, the money sits in the banking system. It doesn't chase goods. Prices stay flat. Australia, on the other hand, is a little different. We won't save 25% of our salaries, never have. We borrow, we spend, housing eats half of our income. We've got an affordability crisis already before the printer even fires. When stimulus hits us, it goes straight to consumers. Inflation arrives within 12 months, not 25 years like it has in Japan. Japan did pay a price though, just not in supermarket prices, in the value of their currency. The yen has roughly lost half of its value against the US dollar in the last 15 years. Japan's printing pain hid in the exchange rate. Australians, our economy can't hide pain that way. We import far too much. Our banks borrow too much offshore. A weak dollar lands straight into the cost of our living. And one more thing, for 15 years, low Japanese interest rates have been doing us all a favour. Japanese funding has kept the Australian mortgage rates lower than they would have been otherwise. That era is ending. Japan's 10-year bond yield just hit its highest level since 1997, and it continues to rise. Japanese inflation is back for the first time in 30 years. The cheap Japanese funding that has quietly subsidised the global financial system is completely drying up. We mistook slow consequences for safe consequences. We're about to find out the difference. We had every chance to learn from Japan when the global financial crisis hit, and our leaders convinced themselves they would borrow Japan's playbook without inheriting the Japanese problems. The GFC, when we all got hooked. September 2008, let me take you back there. Lehman Brothers collapses. The American financial system is just days away from breakdown. Now, Australia didn't have America's problems directly. The RBA itself said our banks were well capitalised and very highly rated. Our financial system wasn't built the same way as Wall Street's, and our regulation has tightened significantly in the years since. If you lived through 2008 though, you'll remember it was a very worrying time. Most of us kept our jobs, but the GFC still hit us hard, just through different doors. Door one, the global share markets crashed. The ASX 200 lost nearly half of its value, and every superbalance got smashed. Door two, global credit markets froze. That forced the RBA to slash interest rates by more than 4% in 7 months to keep credit flowing. And door three, and this is the one that most Australians don't realise, this is something I learnt whilst working inside the system for 15 years. Australian banks don't actually fund themselves from your local savings accounts. Total lending in this country is roughly twice the size of local deposits. So banks have to fund the gap from somewhere else. That somewhere else is the wholesale funding market. About 1/3 of their funding comes from offshore international capital markets, mostly in US dollars. So when the global credit markets froze in late 2008, our banks suddenly couldn't roll their offshore debt at a reasonable price. The Australian government had to step in with a deposit guarantee to stimulate deposits. And two of our biggest banks, Westpac and NAB, accessed emergency funding facilities from the US Federal Reserve. Our well-regulated, well-capitalised banks needed Fed support to stay liquid. Here's what that all means in plain English. When international interest rates rise, our mortgage rates feel it, even if the RBA hasn't moved. When global credit markets seize up, even our most conservative banks can't function without overseas funding to help. We're a small country with a large banking system, and we are in a real unavoidable sense slaves to international interest rates. The decisions made in Washington, in Tokyo, and in Frankfurt land in your mortgage monthly repayment, whether you realise it or not. So this was an American crisis, but it landed on every Australian super statement, every mortgage rate, every bank account. And that's how connected the global system is now. The Fed had a choice: let the system collapse or copy Japan's playbook. Print money, buy bonds. They chose the printer. And honestly, that first round in 2008 was probably the right call. But here's where they got the lesson wrong. The emergency response worked, but by 2010, the system had stabilised. Time to put the printer away, but they didn't. QE2 in 2010 and QE3 in 2012. Operation twist, more bond buying. The emergency ended, but the printing didn't. The addiction continued. That was the moment the West got hooked. The printer stopped being an emergency tool and started becoming business as usual. And once something is normal, it rarely goes back to being abnormal. Now, COVID, when we went nuclear. Now imagine you've been doing this for 10 years. The debt's bigger, the deficits are bigger, and you can't go back. And then, in March 2020, a pandemic. The economy shuts down overnight. Tax revenue collapses, just as you need to spend more than you've ever spent in peacetime before. So what do? You hit the printer harder than ever before in human history. In 2 years, the US Federal Reserve more than doubled its balance sheet, from $4.3 trillion to $8.9 trillion. Australia did its own version, the UK, Europe, Japan, Canada, every major economy fired up that printer at the same time. And here's where I want to be straight with you. The initial response kept people in their jobs. stopped the economy from falling off a cliff, and once again was the right call. Nobody had a playbook for shutting down the global economy via a pandemic, but it went too far and it kept going for too long. Households were sitting on the highest savings in 60 years post-COVID in Australia. Asset prices were going vertical. The Reserve Bank of Australia held rates at almost zero until May 2022, despite inflation already showing signs of takeoff. They told us that rates wouldn't rise until 2024. They were wrong though, by 2 whole years. And when you flood the system with new money, it doesn't land evenly. It flows first to the people who already own assets. Shares, property, businesses, those people get rich fast. Their houses doubled, and the people who didn't own assets, younger workers, renters, savers, got handed the inflation bill, not 12 months later. Groceries, rent, petrol, mortgages, the cost of just existing went up. Now, let me put these trillions into something you can actually feel. The US government owes $38.5 trillion. That number is too big to mean anything to anyone. So divided across every American, every man, woman, and child, each one carries about 114,000 USD of government debt on their shoulders. The newborn baby born in Texas this morning owes the US government over $100,000 before they even take their first breath. Australia is not as bad yet, but total Australian government debt, federal, state, and local combined, sits at about $1.6 trillion. Across our 27 million people, that's about $60,000 of government debt per Australian. That's $150,000 per household. And it's growing every single day. Through future tax, future inflation, or both, that bill needs to be paid. So why can't they just stop? In 2018, the Federal Reserve tried. Within 12 months, they needed to abort because the financial system completely seized up. They tried again in 22, same problem. They can shrink slightly. They can't get back to where they started. Japan can't even raise interest rates meaningfully without their bond market completely collapsing. Europe can't tighten without triggering a sovereign debt crisis. They've now all built a system that requires them to just keep printing. And the moment they stop, things break. Every time they had a chance to take some short-term pain for long-term stability, the easy path won. And now that's the trap. They're in over their heads and they can't nor will they pull us out. Because the truth that applies to every part of this life, there is never any easy way out. There's no shortcut home. Central banks tried to shortcut their way through every crisis since Japan started their very own in 2001. Each time, the damage just got deferred. We're living through that moment now. So as we've concluded, the system can't protect you. The question is, how do you protect yourself? In the next video, the final part of this series, I'll work you through exactly what I'm doing. The 4 asset classes I personally use to position my family for the future. Why understanding all of this has made me leave a 15-year banking career and start trading full-time. If you want the full explanation and data, comment clarity below and grab the report and link in my description. I'm Christian and this is Capital Clarity. Looking forward to seeing you in part 3. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.